So welcome everyone to this new community webinar. With me here today is Koen van Beek. He's in product marketing, and my name is Jan de Vries. I'm a Senior Community Engagement Manager here at Mendix. And today's webinar will be about citizen development. And Koen will take us through that. What is citizen development? What are citizen developers? And most importantly, how can they help us in our projects and build better solutions for customers? Now, during the webinar, you can chat with us using the group chat window or use the webinars channel in our new Slack environment. And if you look in the webinar window, in the top left, there's a button that lets you join our Slack environment. So we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. Feel free to ask your questions during the webinar. And then once Koen and I are done with the main part, we'll go through the questions one by one. So feel free to post them in the channel whenever you have any questions, or you can save them up for afterwards. And we'll go through them one by one. And this webinar will be recorded. So we will post a link to the recording after the webinar. So you can share that with your colleagues, with other people who couldn't make it today. So let's get started. I'll now give the floor to Koen.
Thank you, Jan. So like Jan said, my name is Koen, and I'm in product marketing. And a couple of weeks ago, Jan asked me to do something about citizen development for the community. Because he mentioned that there's many people at Meetups that hear our story around citizen development, but are not quite sure what it is or haven't seen it yet and have some questions around it. What is citizen development? How does it impact me? And all of those questions are great. And next to my marketing role, I actually consider myself to be a citizen developer here at Mendix. And I've been helping several of our customers get started with some citizen dev programs, working with clients all over our community, working with over 100 citizen developers so far. And one of the key things that I've seen work really well was when professional developers and citizen developers meet, work together, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around that. So in this webinar, I'd like to provide an overview of what citizen development is, why it's happening, and what it looks like on Mendix. So before we dive into it, why is all of this happening? This shouldn't be news to anyone that's in any way related to software development. But business demand for applications is increasing dramatically because everything needs to be digitized. The world of paper forms is over. If you want to engage customers in new ways, the first thing you think of is applications. And that's great news, especially for a developer community in Mendix, right? The reality is, though, that a lot of companies are struggling to keep up with the pace. And talent scarcity is the #1 obstacle for people to get there. To put it in other words, there's just way more ideas for applications than there are people to go build those applications. So why do people want to build applications? Usually to solve some type of a business problem. And if those problems are not being solved, they don't just go away. And you will have some people, usually in the business, try and use the tools that they have available to go build something. So this here on this slide is an example of what I call an Excel application or a spreadsheet application, where through a combination of macros and copy and pasted VBA logic, someone is trying to add a login screen on a spreadsheet because the spreadsheet is super important to some type of a process and they need to control it in one way, shape, or form. And these are horrible to maintain. They're super risky because they can break, and nobody really likes these. And the problem is that they're everywhere. And people have gotten very creative in making those. In a way, it's very impressive. And we really believe that there just is a better way of doing this. And many people agree. And what you see in many large organizations in particular is if these spreadsheets become important enough and they break down or someone leaves the company that knows how they work, IT ends up owning them in a way because they have to work. And suddenly there's all of this unpredictable and frankly boring work that ends up at IT organizations. So who are the people that are building these types of things, and what sets them apart? One major thing is these people like to tinker, and a lot of people actually like to tinker nowadays. This is an image of a voice-controlled light bulb, and it's controlled through Alexa. And there's many people that have these in their homes. I have them in mine. Jan, do you have some?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you just take a step back and think about voice-controlled light bulbs, 20 years ago, no one would have believed that millions of people would have the technical skills to get something like this done. And now, granted, it's very easy and the setup is very easy, but through a combination of interest, like people like to tinker with technology, ease of use, Amazon and companies that make these light bulbs made it very easy to get started. Through those two things, suddenly a lot of people are capable of doing it. And this sort of spirit of trying to tinker and trying to build things is what we call making. And we really believe that everyone is a maker. And not everyone makes the same type of things, but everyone is capable of making something, be that a spreadsheet, be that a voice-controlled light bulb. And you see this strongest in children even, where they all like to draw things, they like to make things with Lego blocks, and somewhere along the way that gets lost. But the spirit is still there. Now, if everyone is a maker, that doesn't mean that every maker is the same. This is a model of how we see the world of different types of makers. So we have a spectrum. One side is focused on technology and the other is very focused on solutions. So some people just really do not care at all about what the technology is that they use as long as it solves a problem. And there's other people that care a lot about what the technology is. But what we see is that the citizen developers are really focused on these solutions. If you think back to the Excel spreadsheets I showed earlier, what you see is that it's the tool that they have available. They don't really care that much about what technology they use. It just solves a problem. If you look at professional developers, they usually care a lot more about technology, and the types of solutions that they build require that interest. The way that we support these people and support everyone is we have a combination of 3 IDEs and the possibilities to do code extensions. So we have Mendix Studio, which is a no-code environment geared towards citizen developers. We have Mendix Studio Pro, which is geared towards professional developers. And we have all sorts of methods of doing code extensions. So what we did is we took the same platform, the Mendix platform, and made a very easy-to-use environment separate from the pro developer environment for citizen devs to start building. And we kept a very focused and slightly more complex and powerful environment in Mendix Studio Pro available for the pro devs. Underlying all of it is still the same platform, which allows these people to work together. And this is something that I've seen a lot at our customers, where someone plays around with an idea in the business and they make a little prototype, and then they sync it back to a professional developer for final implementation. Or development teams start involving their users during the development process, almost as a form of advanced user acceptance testing. And this allows for some pretty neat ways of working together. So the 3 sort of ways of working together that we see with citizen developers are, 1, participating in the development process. And this is really what I said earlier, advanced user acceptance testing. Instead of waiting for something to be done, try and involve someone while you're still building it, and suddenly you can move a lot faster. And you can get some of the ideas of power users or really knowledgeable business experts into your applications much faster. The second one is about experimenting and prototyping new ideas. Often some people that know a process really well or know a customer really well have some idea of what an application could be, but it's hard for them to communicate the requirements. Giving them some tools to try some building themselves and testing it with their users allows them to do a couple of iterations and allows them to validate a couple of things. 1, that the idea is useful, and 2, that it actually sort of works in Mendix, that it's not a horrible technology fit. And then you can use that prototype almost as a requirements document. And that's a much better discussion to have than writing all of it down, because there's so much interpretation and work that needs to be done to get there. And then the final one is business users building smaller applications themselves. So that's the Excel use case effectively. If someone just needs to capture some simple data, or they do to support a simple workflow, building those applications is not that hard from a technology point of view. So why wouldn't they be able to do that themselves? So take the first example, like having someone from the business be a part of the dev process. This is a screenshot of an application in Mendix Studio. This application is for editing timesheets and submitting them and approvals surrounding them. Sometimes you have this case when you're developing an application where a user just doesn't like something in the UI. For instance, the sliders. It's something that they don't like, but they have a hard time articulating why, and they have a hard time articulating what a better alternative could be. Well, you could fork that application, put it on a different branch, so the main line is not polluted in any way, shape, or form. And you could ask that sort of power user to start playing around with the user interface in Studio. Maybe you like this button better, or maybe you like a form field. And they can try that themselves and get a feel for what's possible and what it would look like. And that could save a couple of feedback cycles versus a scenario where you really have to wait until the end of the sprint. Then the idea of prototyping. So one of our customers, eXp Realty, started using prototyping for their product management and product owner team. And one of their quotes is that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a working prototype is worth 1,000 pictures. What they really found was that these product managers and product owners who really like engaging with the users could build simple prototypes for new proposed functionality in Studio fairly quickly. They could go to a customer, they could test it. Sometimes while they were at the customer, they could do a couple of cycles, but then they wouldn't have the skills to implement it in a scalable solution, and they would need the development team for it. So they could take that prototype, have a discussion with the development team, and the development team had a really easy time understanding what the ask was from product management because it was in the form of an application. So their estimate is that they're moving about 10 times faster as a result of moving to this way of working versus using picture-based mockups or even doing just user stories on paper. And one of the sort of surprising benefits that both the dev team saw and the product management team saw was that the product managers got a lot better at sort of speaking Mendix, speaking and understanding what it is that the dev team uses. And that made it very easy for them to communicate. And then the final example of just digitizing some simple forms or doing some basic product applications or workflows. This is an example paper inspection report. And large enterprises are littered with these types of things. And what this means is that someone has to print these forms. Someone has to take a printed copy. They have to fill it in. Then they usually have to scan it in some way, shape, or form, put it on a Dropbox or a OneDrive or on a SharePoint. Then someone else needs to go through a bunch of scanned PDFs. And they have to input that information in some different system. And it's just a massive waste of time. And when you look at processes like these, what I find super interesting is that our own engineering team here at Mendix, so the people that are building our platform, sometimes they run into stuff like this as well. A recent example was when GDPR became law and we had to change some things in some applications. At the start, there was some manual work involved in deleting data from our platform. But developers really hate manual work. So it didn't take them very long to build some sort of a solution, even like a small workflow tool that they built, so that all of the data would automatically be deleted and it would save them a bunch of time. Now, why did they do that? One, they didn't like the work they were doing. Two, there was some sort of a business case in a way because it was inefficient for them to spend time on stuff like that. And then the third, they had the skills to go build automation. The same is true for business people. If you give the people that are dealing with these forms the tools to go make their life better, they will. So what would that look like in this case? You do have to teach these people some new skills because dealing with a form is very different than building a Mendix application. And this is where professional developers can add a lot. if someone is trying to tinker and build a better thing, just helping them a little bit with what is a good structure for a domain model, how would that data be like added to the domain model, and what would the page structure look like? Those are some typical questions that are really easy to answer for a professional, and it can really help someone build a simple application. I've seen this work at a couple of customers where people saved hours of work by just digitizing this in an afternoon. So where does it leave professional developers? Because this all sounds very great, and it's all about more people building applications and solving more problems. But what is the role of a professional developer? This here is just an example of a Mendix application that we have in our solutions gallery. That is about intelligent field services planning. It's a pretty complex application. There's a lot of fun stuff going on in the back end. A citizen dev is never going to be capable of building something like this. You need a very sophisticated skill set to go do it. And that's really the role of the professional developers. Because if you think about it, if simple, and from a technology point of view, pretty boring use cases can be built by the business themselves, or at the very least, they can prototype some ideas, that will save professional developers a lot of time. And they can spend that time on things that actually matter more. So really revolutionizing the way you engage customers or the way you do planning, to really spend some time on some new innovations and do more interesting work, because there's a lot of demand for more complex solutions, and citizen developers are never going to take that away. So at the end of the day, citizen development is starting to happen because we just need a lot more software, and the only way to get there is if more people start building. Professional and citizen developers are not the same, neither will they ever be. And there's a good win-win scenario there where citizen developers can start taking up some of the more boring and smaller applications, which are really helpful for them still. And that leaves professional developers with a lot more time to actually tinker on the things that matter more. So that is a really brief overview of what citizen development on the Mendix platform looks like right now, and how professional and citizen developers can work together.
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview. Thanks, Koen. And it really shows that citizen developers, it's not just just a marketing word, marketing term to make things, look more attractive or, whatever it is, but it has an actual practical value. And I find it really impressive that you've been able to show this at customers as well, right? You went to the customers, you talked about this, you explained it, and you actually went out there and tried it. And customers were actually excited about this. Now, I know that most of the people who join these webinars are experienced developers, right? They are modeling solutions every day, and I think most of them are a little skeptical, right? Citizen developers, well, what did they know, right? They don't know anything about security or integrations. Why would we need them? So I hope your explanation has at least answered a part of that. And I'd love to know from the audience, what else would you like to know, right? Especially from, I think from both a business perspective, team setups, or how does this add value to a company, but also as a pro developer, how do citizen developers make your life easier? Because I can get into the idea that developers feel like they might, they might be in the way, like preventing them from doing the actual good stuff. But yeah, I'm really curious what everyone thinks about that now. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let us know in the Mendix community Slack. If you're not a member yet, you can join us by clicking the link in the top left corner. You can make an account. It's all free. We have more than 1,000 other developers on there already. And if you go to the webinars channel, you can ask your questions there. So one of the questions that's being asked is, how can citizen and professional developers work together in more complex apps, like the one you showed about the planning tool? Because, yeah, I guess the tools, as soon as an idea and an initial start of an app becomes a more solidified product, I think it becomes complicated very quickly. How would you explain that to the audience?
I think there's a few ways. The most obvious one is depending on who the citizen developer is. If it's a power user of, say, the application that's being replaced with a new one, in that scenario, they have a lot of knowledge about the process right now and what's broken in it and what they would like to have fixed. By giving them access to a separate branch, so one away from the main line, so they can't accidentally break anything, and having them take a look in Studio, they can make some small changes, or they can experiment a little bit with what the application looks like. And that's most effective on the user interface as an application gets more complex. So making some small changes and playing around with it a little bit. A big part of that is the conversation that happens as a part of that experience from the citizen dev side, because you can do sort of user acceptance testing in a way while you're doing it. As an app gets more complex, that gets harder. So there's sort of a ceiling to that in a way. Now, the second way is prototyping. Our customer, the example I shared, EXP Realty, has a very complex implementation of multiple microservices. It's really a pretty cool solution, and they're growing very quickly. What happens is the product owner team, in that case, they prototype some ideas for new functionality or for improved functionality, and then they sort of test that out, do a lot of iterations with the users themselves, and then they give that application to the development team for implementation into the larger application. So instead of working in the complex application directly, they sort of take out a section and they prototype it, and then they give it back. Those are really the two main ways.
And so another question here from Frederick is, who are the citizen developers? Are they mostly product owners? Are they different types of users? And maybe a broader question is, how do you find out who the citizen developers within your company are?
Yeah, so that's a great question. They don't really correlate very well with job titles. So I'll just share some of the examples I've seen. Product owners, like you mentioned, are a very good group of candidates because they're good at thinking about technology already. Business analysts can be a very good group as well. And then here's where it gets interesting, and it really depends on the industry. At companies with a very strong engineering discipline, you have a bunch of smart people that are very analytical, that are sometimes used to writing complex models and different tools. Those can be great citizen developers. I've seen lawyers at a legal firm prototype some solutions themselves because they had to do with literal rooms full of paperwork. So they can be very varied. The group is very varied. What they all have in common is that they're really sort of intrinsically upset with some stupid, inefficient thing they have to go do, like a literal room full of paperwork, or working with 3 different systems that all do the same thing. And there's just something about it that really annoys them. They have a degree of interest in technology and sort of a tech savviness to them, and they like to tinker. And those are really the main aspects of citizen developers that you can see.
And looking at the Mendix products that we have, Studio and Studio Pro, would you say that there's a clear distinction between citizen developers use Studio and pro developers use Studio Pro, or is it more nuanced?
Like anything in life, it's more nuanced, but the goal is that Studio is the best tool for citizen devs and Studio Pro is the best tool for professional devs. We have a large group of people here around the corner from where we are sitting right now in our engineering department working on both tools. So we as a company are very committed to both. in reality, what we see happening is that if someone uses Studio a lot, they get better at doing Mendix effectively. And at that point, say after a year, they may be able to do something in Studio Pro, and they may prefer that tool for some actions. So we see a little bit of overlap, but definitely the aim is to have Studio for sit devs and have Studio Pro for professional developers.
Great. And I saw that one of our MVPs, Nolan Ramsey, also chimed in on Slack, answering Frederick's question. He says, the citizen developers are the tinkerers that build awesome workbooks in finance or in ops, that build access databases, or other tech people that create weird extensions with their platform that need a tool like Mendix. So it's usually the people who are already trying to find ways to make their processes easier, to make their work life easier, and to automate things. And I think those are exactly the people who, should definitely be involved in more in the process and be given access to Studio or a branch to try it out, to test. And I think it's really important also to note that don't just give them a tool and walk away, right? Try to guide these people into thinking the right way, think in a solution type of manner, while giving them the necessary technological skills to build the apps themselves. And at some point, there will be a cutoff, right? Where if you want to build a certain integration or a certain automation or a certain piece of logic, they will need the pro devs. But as Kun said, I think that is
There's one interesting nuance there, though, is for a lot of the more complex stuff, you would need a pro dev. But you could also just make a reusable module out of some complexity. If it's a standard integration to some sort of a system, and then suddenly someone that has very little dev experience can use a connector because it's just a drag and drop exercise for them. I've done that myself numerous times where I've built some simple applications for some internal purposes, and I was able to use some single sign-on functionality that I don't even know how to build that. I wouldn't even know where to start, but it was very easy. So reuse is a pretty interesting angle there, where even though it's really complex, if a pro dev already built it, which is the case of a lot of our more mature customers where they have a team and they have a private app store, suddenly those citizen developers can reuse it.
So here's another question from Wouter. Are citizen developers just popping up in your organization, or are they assigned by someone? And if they do happen to pop up in your organization, how do you keep track of these citizen developers and the apps they build? And I think initially the question is, how do you deal with that as a company? Do you actively start looking for citizen developers, or do you already have a group of people who've shown interest in this? And setting very clear, setting very clear guidelines of where do we let these people start? And back to my previous point, I think it's important to never let these people just drift around on their own island, building their own thing without communicating with the rest of the team.
Yeah, so what's interesting is it really depends on the organization. Like the question of, are they just popping up? Or are they assigned? There's a lot there in terms of, if you're a very small company, usually you know what a lot of people are up to. And then if you log in on Mendix, and you can just see, well, so-and-so from accounting signed up and is now part of the platform, and you can have a cup of coffee with them and just discuss what's going on. Or you can invite them during that same cup of coffee. For a larger organization, that can be a lot harder. And there's a couple of things there. So firstly, the people that are building those Excel spreadsheets right now, the tinkerers, as Nolan called them, they're already there. So in a way, they have already popped up. And those people are prime candidates to be the first citizen developers. So if there is a problem with some type of a spreadsheet and someone is getting stuck there, that would be the prime candidate to start building an application. You can also start assigning them in a way. And that is if there is an interest to start a large program. I've seen this at a couple customers, and it works really well. To just find a couple of people that you know are these tinkerers, and you also trust them to a degree, and they have a good relationship with some people in IT. Do a workshop with them, do a day-long kickoff, and start building some of these applications together. And then bring those to production, take what you've learned, and then they usually know some more people, and then suddenly it grows organically. And then the question about keeping track of citizen developers and the apps they build, there's some features in the company admin or in that platform admin at Mendix that allows you to see, if you're a company admin, allows you to see all of the different applications that are built on the platform, who owns them, if they're being used, what cloud they're on, if they're licensed, even if if a certified developer worked on them. So that's a good tool to detect them. A better process is to just continue to communicate. If there's a new person on the company buzz, send them a message, ask them what they're working on. And if you just start communicating with people, you start to see that these people are just trying to solve problems, and it's a good way to keep track of it in that way.
Yeah, very good. So in terms of customers, right? So we have customers with development teams and people running apps. Would you involve these citizen developers in your existing application landscape? Or would you say, try out, the sandbox version or the free version first, and then maybe at some point you can involve them in some part of the development cycle for an existing app? Or is that, completely off the board?
It really depends on the type of applications you're building. You can involve, again, as a sort of form of advanced user acceptance testing, you can involve people in existing projects. I think the best way to get started is the latter option you described. So that's about starting in the free version, experimenting, seeing if you can take a paper form and turn it into an application, see if you can take a spreadsheet you don't like and turn it into a web app. That would be it's a less risky way to get started.
Yeah. Yeah, and Nolan Ramsey chimed in here as well. He says, governance is a necessary discipline for this. So I recommend you have those citizen developers go through the learning path to become a RAT certified developer as sort of a first step. And then if that works out, design a process or an app to let them submit their app for enterprise review and inventory what activity is happening. So you can also tap into the APIs of Mendix to pull in apps associated to your companies into your governance app as a suggestion. So yeah, I think that's a really good process of getting people excited about it, involving them, and also making them visible within the company.
Things like enterprise review can sound like a lot of work sometimes. Some of the most interesting things I've seen at customers is where they started using AQM, the automated quality monitor, to automate some of that, where if the application scored above a certain score, they'd be fine with it, and they wouldn't even review it because they trust the developer. But if it was below that, then they would review it. And if it was below another threshold, they wouldn't even look at it because they just decline it based on quality. So there's ways to automate some of that work as well.
So in terms of looking at our market, right, we're active in the low-code market, and citizen developers is a way of expanding our pool of talent, developers and people who can potentially contribute to solutions. How do you see that new group of users grow over over the next couple of years? Is it, where are we in terms of numbers or, yeah?
It's interesting. It depends on your definition. So if you include the people that are currently doing all of the Excel work and you label them as citizen developers, I think they already outnumber professional developers. There's a lot of those people. If you don't, and you define them as using a low-code tool like Mendix or even Studio, then we're at an early stage and we're seeing a lot of growth. I mean, we launched in April. We've seen a lot of user uptake. And what's interesting is just like first introducing Mendix or low code within a customer, success breeds more success. So the first applications that went live from citizen developers got a lot of excitement, and more citizen developers started, and more citizen developers started, and more citizen developers started. So we really see this sort of snowball effect at some of our customers. And I think you can see a lot of uptick. If you look a couple of years into the future, I like to use analyst data for these types of predictions because they're really hard. And Gartner started predicting that in about 5 years, there will be, I believe, 3 citizen developers for every active professional developer, just because the sheer size of the software challenge and what we need to go build is so massive that that's the only way to get it done.
Right.
There will not be fewer professional developers, by the way, because if anyone believes that, I think they're missing something, because the need for complex applications is only increasing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a reason, right, where there's the unemployment rate for programmers and developers is, I think, around 1% or even below 1%. It's because there's only the demand is only going to increase, and automation is only increasing. So there's the question here from Chris, and he says, "How can a citizen developer get noticed by professional developers, other than wearing a low-code club T-shirt, which you should, by the way, which is do you have any tips on that? Because I'm doing the Rapid Developer Learning Path now, but what will be a next good step to getting noticed?" And I would say the first question is, are you doing this in a company that's already working with Mendix, or are you the first one? Are you trying this on your own? I think there's a difference there as well.
Yeah, definitely. If you're within a company and there's other developers or professional developers are working with Mendix within your company, you can use the buzz. You can use the platform to go find your colleagues, and you can send them an email or a message, or you could just say hi. I think that would be the best way. If this is a broader question about how do you get noticed in the community, there's meetups happening almost everywhere, I believe. In our more mature markets, there's a bunch of them. They're everywhere in the Netherlands now. So that would be a great way to get noticed in the community, is to just go to a meetup. If those are not available, well, join our Slack. You're already there. Start asking questions on the forums. Those would be the most obvious ways, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I also think it really depends on what you want to achieve exactly. Are you on the path to becoming a pro developer, or do you want to work together with the development team? I think those are some good things to think about. And Nolan posted an answer here as well. He says, if you build something that you're excited about and you don't have access to the proper channels, I would start off by showing it off to your peer group and getting their inputs. And then take it to your leadership and start asking, because they should support you in making those connections. So if a governance process doesn't exist, take leadership in volunteering to put that together as a start for your enterprise. So I think that's really valuable input as well. Thanks, Nolan, for that. So question here is, are the meetups listed somewhere centrally? Yes. So we have a link to the meetup group, which I'll post in the Slack in just a minute. And it lists a world map of where we host all our meetups and all our upcoming events. And in the Netherlands, we host them about every 2 weeks. Actually, this month, there's a meetup every week. So, take your pick. You can go to Utrecht or Enschede or any of the other locations. You'll meet other developers and also citizen developers in person. And everyone is very eager to share their experiences and help you out. So definitely join us. We're very happy to see you. We also have a first meetup coming up in Germany, in Frankfurt next month on November 19. We have a meetup coming up in the UK in December We don't have a specific date yet, but we'll get there soon. And we're even starting our meetups in France next year. So in February, we'll have our first meetup in Paris. Next to that, the US is growing as well. So we are planning on starting meetups in a number of universities. And even though these are held on a campus and are mainly for students to do Q&A and help them fix solutions, build solutions, they are open and accessible to anyone. So if there's a university close to you that is organizing a meetup, feel free to join, either to learn something or to share what you know, and help out the community that way. Oh yeah, Nolan's already sharing it.
You MVP.
Yeah, Nolan, the true MVP. Yeah, thanks so much, Nolan, for helping us out here and supporting us. Yeah, so let us know if you have any other questions. We'll just give everyone a little bit of time. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, Kun and I were talking about this yesterday, and he said, yeah, but Jan, you're a citizen developer as well. I was like, really, am I? Well, he said, did you ever build anything to make your life easier? Well, yes. Well, then you're a citizen developer. There you go. I mean, it didn't have a specific business value for my company as it was a personal thing, but it did help me breach that, border, that wall of, am I able to build something? Am I able to put my ideas into something that is tangible, something that works and something that makes my life easier? And it really does. I made a simple app as an example, but I am actually using it every week, and I keep adding little improvements and making the process easier. And sometimes I just take half a day in the weekend or whatever to build it out, make it more complicated, add some logic, because I have an idea, right? I have an idea. I want this, and as soon as you start building the apps, you get into the habit of thinking in that way, right? Thinking in the way of logic. And especially when you look at things you've built yourself, at some point you can think of, hey, I want to do this. And then you automatically dream up the logic and the microflows behind it and how to actually build it. It's quite cool. And I'm saying that as a non-developer. So, but now I've been branded citizen developer. So, thanks, Kun. I will await my low code club T-shirt and wear it proudly. Yeah. If there are no further questions, I want to thank Kun for presenting. I want to thank Nolan for helping out with the answers and providing some more context and help. It was really good. Thank you all for asking your questions. I hope that you now all have a better understanding of what citizen developers are, how we as Mendix view citizen developers, and especially their value, not just to a business, but also to a development team, and as part of the community as well, helping each other out with ideas and becoming better developers. And if you have any further questions, feel free to ask them here in the webinars channel or any other place in the Slack channel. Or, of course, there is the Mendix forum where you can ask all your questions. And with that, thank you for joining, and see you next time.